trying to be rude. I ain't trying to be cool. Why you trying to be cute? I ain't got it smooth.
Peace. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so before I like to talk, I always do a greeting to the family, and if you can, goes like this, I would say peace, and you would say peace back, or I would say peace family, and you say peace family back. It's a way just to bring the family who are not here with us into the space. So peace family. Peace family. Peace family. There we go. Y'all can feel it with the, the part of your gut. You want to tuck in and everything. It's cool. So my name is Julien, and I'm from Harlem. I'll start the story there just because for a lot of young people that I've worked with, that a lot of us have worked with, they don't have the benefit of always knowing where they're from. So having a connection to where you may be from in the present, or really creating space for our young people to identify what it is that they own, I think for me, is really the start of my own story. My mother, Gwendolyn Terrell, is from the Bahamas. It's a beautiful island from a very, very small part of the Bahamas, not Nassau. My dad is from a small town outside of Buffalo, and I love me some Buffalo too. But I would say my twin sister, who's not here with me, and we're from Harlem. And I say it that way because I think a lot of how I show up now is just based on the stories, the influences that I've had, the experiences that I've had, but always prioritizing feelings over the words that sometimes we don't have access to experience it. Because there's a lot of young people who are walking out here just with a lot of affirmations, but also a lot of strong feelings of things that are not right, and don't always have the people around them to tell them that not only are you right, but you have the power to change that. And that's really what a lot of the work that I've been a part of for the past 11 years has been a part of. And I love making trouble, so that's where my story will be a part of. When I grew up, there was always this concept of a park that was very foreign to me. A park for me was concrete. It was a water fountain that did not work. It was a bodega or a corner store that had water for cheap and them styrofoam cups that we all don't want to use, but at that time was certainly life. And then there was that basketball court. We didn't have grass at the time. Sometimes you had swings that had the metal pieces connected. Most of the times you did not, or there were seats that were too small for you to sit in. But at the end of the day, that was our park. Nowadays, some people may call it your relationship to place. Some people may call it your safe space, and a whole bunch of other terms that we feel powerful with. But to us, that was our park. That was the Jacob Schiff Playground on 137th in Amsterdam, right across the street from City College. Again, I didn't come from a political program. I came from a friendship. So this is not only the story of me, but it's the story of my brother Broderick, my brother Jermaine, Jarrell, Tyrell, Abe, who's been locked up for the last year, who I'll talk about in a little while, Eli, and Malik. And I say that just because I didn't come from a youth program, but I came from a strong friendship that really inspired me to fight and keeps me on these corners, talking to young people, a lot of who are on the wall. And a lot of time we walk by these young people not always realizing how much power they have and only honor them once they're not with us. So I keep them and I think the memories of my brothers specifically with me because a lot of it came from the Jacob Schiff Playground. At the time, anybody here know where or what Riverbank State Park is? Okay, so it's my brother Omari over here. We went to junior high school together. Say what's up, Omari. Hey. So Riverbank State Park was actually the first time I had ever seen grass in Harlem. For some of you, it's like, but how is that possible? And it was like, again, when we were going to the park, we went to the concrete playground and not to somewhere that had grass. So when Riverbank came around, it was this whole thing. It was like, oh, not only are we going to have a park that's going to be open a lot later, but we're actually going to have grass that we can stand on, right? Anybody ever been to public housing and there's beautiful grass, but they're like, don't step on that. Don't step. It's almost like you're at a museum. It's like, don't disturb the grass. That's not to be stood on. So Riverbank was really that first point of access, which is a term I lose a lot with my young people. But as soon as you went there, it literally smelled like garbage. I grew up on Convent. Riverbank State Park is on Riverside. So to smell garbage in your apartment on 142nd and Convent is crazy. I didn't know about environmental justice at that time. I didn't know about organizing, but I did know that there were a group of folks from my neighborhood that was led by a group of women who laid across the highway to make sure that people who were driving through our community knew what was going on in our community. And that we weren't just a neighborhood next to a highway, or we weren't just a neighborhood that had a state park that smelled like trash because it was built on top of the North River sewage treatment plant. But for us, that was our opening into what we understood to be a real park. So we kind of add that real on top of that, right? But again, we went there, we played ball, we bought our jugs of water, and the games ended when somebody got too sick to continue playing. So at that point, it was just like, okay, well, we can either stay here or we can go back to what we consider to be the real park. So this is around the time I was 9 or 10. And at that time, I think when we started going back, the whole point was like, this is kind of what we consider to be our headquarters, We've had several headquarters throughout the time growing up in West Harlem, but that park specifically was always kind of our base, so to speak. And at the time, as a young graffiti writer, one of the things that I loved about that park is there's the handball park on the far side of it where, a lot of the elders in the neighborhood were really mindful about how they were stern with us. They were very direct, and it's like, if you want to go write and do your stuff, just go do it in the park. It was understood that that's where you can go and do your art. You wouldn't get judged about it, saying you wouldn't have anybody who would pull you by the ear and tell you to stop doing it, but that was our safe space, right? But it was also the first time I was ever accosted by a police officer. It was the first time I was ever beat up by an officer. But that was also something that happened on a continuous basis. So for me, it was a point of confusion where you had folks who not only were from our neighborhood, but had been in our neighborhood for years, who were establishing that it was safe for us to be there practicing our art. But you also had officers who did not look like us, who were not from our neighborhood, who were telling us that we couldn't. And at the time, again, I didn't have any access to a social justice language or politic, and it was, for me, it was just like, I don't feel that this is right. Again, feelings, not so much words, but there was something in me that said that not only was this not right, but we need to do something about it. And as I got older, these situations continued, right? As you had community centers that were closing in our neighborhood, as you had the Harlem School of the Arts, which I still give a lot of praise to because they help nurture a lot of our possibility and vision, but also does not get the support that they need to. We continue just to go back to the park because, to be honest, we are tired of people coming into our lives and having to leave. And at that time, you don't understand that people who are committed to you are forced to leave at times because they can't get supported at their institutions. But for us, it was just like, these are people who we really loved who were not there anymore. But the park was still there and my brothers were still there. So again, we kept them with us. And then I think as I was leaving the neighborhood, I went up to Buffalo to go to school and had the benefit of starting an environmental justice organization up there with some residents and elder women who really shaped who I am. I think the role of elder women specifically in my life, I think is one of the reasons why I'm here, in addition to my brothers. But it was the first time I had ever seen something that was happening in my neighborhood, but in another community. And again, for me, it was like, okay, well, maybe we're onto something. Maybe we're not the only ones who are fighting for a park that has no grass. Maybe we're not the only ones who are trying to spread our vision and to see our stories up on walls and not some random Hennessy ads or Newport ads, bullet point. Does anybody remember those ads in the 90s where you had Newport people and they were smiling? And black folk who was playing volleyball? I was like, when's the last time anybody smoked a Newport and played volleyball? Very confusing, very confusing was. But at the same time, for us, it was the whole point about like that's not what I wanted to see up on the walls. I would rather see, saying what I thought was my chicken scratch graffiti or other people's pictures than to see that. But being up in Buffalo and understanding that people were fighting, that people didn't have access to land, and that the government, saying was trying everything that they possibly could to shut down the self-determination up there, that's when I really started coming into my own power and understanding, again, the story of the park. Right, so the park became a lot more of a symbol for me. Was what is it that I'm willing to fight for? What is it that I'm willing to do? What is the constant that happens in my life in a community, in a society that is actively changing, but continue to criminalize the people who should be setting that vision in the first place. So when I moved back down to the city in 2007, my whole piece is that it was not a question of where I was going to be organizing. I had actually heard the word organizing at that point after organizing for 2 years. So it was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I need to do this in my community. And the beast that is Columbia University was in the middle of their expansion, but the park was still there. And that's where we used to hold little sessions. I'd go and organize and door knock in Grand and door knock in Manhattanville. And then I would go hold circle with the brothers who were not gonna be at these meetings. 1 minute, okay. The people who everybody said weren't really about shit, but to be honest, had more commitment to that community than a lot of folks who were going to those meetings, to be frank about it. But that park was always there for us to hold space. And I use that as a story to frame the work that we do at the Brotherhood Sister Soul, because we believe that not only do young people need to be supported in their leadership, not only do they need to be told that they're leaders, but they need to be actively supported and leading in the way that they see fit. And even if it's going to take a little bit slower, I think at times our movement is always about responding, but doesn't think about the fact not only what are the conditions that we need to create revolution, but what happens afterward. What happens afterward? And the fact that a lot of our young people, including these young people out here, have solutions that none of us are capable of having yet, because they see a possibility that hasn't been, time's up, they have a possibility that I don't think, I think is being actively tapped. And I think we see in a lot of the pictures around the wall, whenever I talk to my young people about what is the movement that I want them to be a part of, I think about some of the photos that I've seen. I think about some of my brothers and sisters who've gone out to Ferguson and asked me to hold space when they got back, or people in some of the cities that unfortunately have not been highlighted yet, but are still fighting. So I tell them, just because the camera's not on you doesn't mean that you shouldn't be fighting. And just because you don't have access to a language or access to a politic doesn't mean that you shouldn't be fighting. Because the young person who's coming up after you does notice. And I'll close with my brother Abe in talking about social media, because there's a lot of times these cops are watching us, and it's supposed to be a space for self-expression, but at the same time they use those points of self-expression to wrap us up and to put our young people under the jail in conspiracy cases. So I would say, saying if you are working with young, encourage that self-expression, but also understand that we don't have time for compromises, all right? And that's it.
I ain't trying to be cool. Why you trying to be cute? I ain't got it smooth. I ain't trying to be rude. I'm just trying to see you move your body with someone. So clap with me. So clap with me. I ain't got it smooth. I ain't trying to be rude. I'm just trying to see you move your body with someone. So clap with me. So clap with me. I ain't got it smooth. I ain't trying to be rude. I'm just trying to see you move your body with someone. So clap with me. Let the kids hit. Let the drums drum. F the sickness. F the hump drum.